Thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon to all. My name is Virginie Boll. I am the coordinator of the IMPACCT Working Group. IMPACCT stands for Importation and Customs Clearance Together. Today at the session, we are going to look at how to address the bureaucratic impediments to import emergency relief goods. I'm going to first start by explaining what the IMPACCT Working Group is. It was created in 2017 at the Humanitarian Networks and Partnership Week in Geneva. And as you can see on the slides, the vision of the IMPACCT Working Group is to make sure that countries and humanitarian partners are adequately prepared to receive international assistance when there is a major disaster. And our mission is to work all together to make sure that the goods that are imported for disaster relief are cleared in an efficient and speedy way to make sure that the people in need receive the international assistance. The members of the group are mentioned in the slide. So we have the World Customs Organization, we have UNCTAD, who is the owner of CIUTA, MSF Belgium as well, Save the Children, representing NGOs, but also in Dubai, the International Humanitarian City, ITU, International Telecommunication Equipment, IFRC, Help Logistics, and the World Bank. And we work together to address and to look at how to ensure that the goods are cleared very quickly. So for that, we have established and drafted a strategic plan that we will present today. And as you know, all the procedures that we have to comply with at the customs entry point come from international conventions that are adopted by member states. So the first presentation will be on this and how the WCO, the World Customs Organization, as the custodian of these international convention, work with the member states. Then, of course, these international convention needs to be translated into the national law. And this is what IFRC is going to present in the second presentation. Of course, all this needs to be done in collaboration and coordination at the national level. And once we have all these actors working together, we need to draft SOP, standard operating procedures, so that we translate the national law into operational procedures to make sure that we as humanitarian actors can follow the rules and comply with the rules that are adopted and created by member states. Then these SOPs should be tested, and we also need to have training. And we have developed an e-learning course that we will present to you today as well. The coordination and collaboration at the regional level is also a key part. The very first humanitarian assistance comes from neighboring countries, but you also have, in the end, the international assistance. The use of information technology is also important. So that's why today we have UNCTAD with us, who is the owner of CIUTA and HELiX, the automated system for relief consignments, and they will make a short presentation. Last but not least, when a disaster strikes, it is important to make sure that we share information, and I will present how we share information in the onset of a natural disaster. So as I have mentioned, the agenda is on the screen. So let's start with the World Customs Organization. And we have the head of the regional office of the World Customs Organization. So sir, you have the floor. Over to you.
Okay. So thank you, Chairperson, for kind introductions. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So could you upload my presentation? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm Norikazu Kuramoto, head of the WCO ROCB AP. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation for giving this opportunity for us, WCO, to make presentation in this event. And I am very glad to work with you as young IMPACCT members and the HELiX teams. So before I start my presentation, I briefly touch on my organization. So ROCB stands for Regional Office of Capacity Building for Asia Pacific. Our office is located in Bangkok, Thailand. Capacity building is one of the main pillars of the WCO objectives and activities. So the name suggests we are a regional office of WCO, and it's a dedicated body for delivering capacity building for Asia Pacific members. As of today, our office covers 33 members, including ASEAN members. So our main objective is to promote WCO conventions and the tools for supporting members' modernization efforts through our activities. So today, I would like to briefly explain about the WCO instruments related to disaster relief. So as you already aware, customs procedure is the key to ensure the legitimate trade and facilitating the logistics. From the disaster relief aspect, customs function and procedure are quite critical and important, supporting recovering and resilience activities from disaster globally. So next slide, please. Yes, this is the contents of my presentation. First, advocacy, Revised Kyoto Convention, Chapter 5 of the specific Annex J. Second, in Istanbul Convention, Annex B9. These two are key instruments and directly related to the disaster relief. I will explain. Next slide, please. First, I would like to explain about the Revised Kyoto Convention, or advocacy in short. So advocacy is the international convention on the simplification and harmonization of the customs procedure for modern and efficient customs procedures. Advocacy entered into force in 2006, and as of today, 128 parties ratified. Advocacy covers most of the basic customs procedures, so advocacy is now a flagship convention of the WCO. Next slide, please. This is the structure of the advocacy. Advocacy consists of 3 parts: main body, general annex, and the specific annexes. General annexes contains provisions that are applicable to all customs procedures, while the specific annexes focus on the specific customs procedure and the practices, such as the importations, exportations, transit, temporary admission, travelers, relief consignment, and so on. Each annex is accompanied by a non-binding guidelines. So speaks Annex J, Chapter 5 is relief consignment. Next slide, please. This is the definition of the relief consignment in the specific Annex J, Chapter 5. I'm sorry, it is a little small to read, but you can see what is the relief goods in the stipulation in the advocacy. So relief consignment means the goods, including vehicles, other means of transportation, foodstuff, medical equipment, clothing, blanket, and blah, blah, blah. The goods, prime necessity, provided as aid to these affected by disaster. So bottom part is also definition of the relief consignment in the Istanbul Convention, or just a comparison. Next slide, please. Next, what does it mention in the advocacy? Simply speaking, the specific Annex J, Chapter 5 aims to provide the simplified and smooth customs procedure for relief consignments. This is the point of the standards and the recommended practices in this specific Annex J. So the expression mentioned that customs clearance relief consignment shall be carried out as a matter of priority. Customs use simplified customs declaration. Customs must allow to lodging, legislating, and the checking of the customs declaration prior to arrival of the goods. Customs clearance to be done outside of the normal operation time and away from the customs office and houses. Customs examination and sampling only conducted in the exceptional cases. Also, ROCB recommended that customers give the clearance regardless of the country of the origin and the goods destination. No economic prohibitions and restrictions. Duties and taxes for relief goods should be waived. So as I mentioned before, each annex has each guideline. So please see the guideline of the specific Annex J through the hyperlink at the bottom of this slide. Later, I will share this my presentation through the Secretariat. So guidelines contains detailed information on the implementation. So, and such guidelines are reviewed and updated to reflect the current practices. So now, as of today, updated in November 2011. Next slide, please. In addition to that, ROCB has other relevant provisions. For example, General Annex Chapter 3, Customs Clearance and other customs formality. General Annex Chapter 6, Customs Control. And General Annex Chapter 7, Application of the IT. So these provisions support to ensure the smooth and facilitated customs procedure on the relief consignment. So as for the Revised Kyoto Convention, WCO is currently conducting comprehensive review with its members and the relevant stakeholders to align the current trade situation and the needs, which is scheduled to be completed in March 2023, including specific Annex J, Chapter 5, Relief Consignment. Next slide, please. Let's move on to the next one, Istanbul Convention. Istanbul Convention is the instrument on the simplification and harmonization of the temporary admission formalities, entered into force in the 1993. Currently, we have 72 contracting parties. The structure of the convention consists of two parts, main body and annexes. Yes, in total 30 annexes Istanbul Convention has. Next slide, please. Istanbul Convention B9 is the annexes on the goods on the humanitarian and the relief consignment for temporary admission. So Annex B9 mentioned that the customs provide a reasonable procedure with imported for humanitarian purposes, medical, surgical, and laboratory equipment and relief consignment. No customs document and the security being required. Security means in here is a customs bond. Customs has a flexibility on the time period for a re-exportation of the goods. The time should be more enough period. Istanbul Convention is to support facilitation relief consignment as a temporary administration at the border at the customs. So in addition to that, WCO has other useful tools for supporting, facilitating relief consignment. So namely, coordinated border management compendium, risk management compendium, safe freight standards, and so on. So if you are interested in, please visit the WCO website and ask the WCO headquarters. Next slide, please. This is the end of my presentations. I would like to echo the WCO has a useful convention and tools to facilitate the disaster relief consignment, and WCO is fully committed to support its members' efforts for harmonization and the modernization customs procedures. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, sir. We are very happy to work with you in the IMPACCT Working Group, and the impact of the World Customs Organization during the emergency and preparedness phase is key to the success of humanitarian operations. So thank you very much for that. Now we would like to understand how these international conventions can be translated into the national law. And one of the projects is the IDRL guidelines that was drafted in 2007. And IFRC will present this tool to enhance the preparedness of governmental organization. Pauline, over to you.
Thanks, Virginie. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. May I please request for my slide to be shared? It's with the AHA organizers.
Okay, otherwise I can do it.
Okay, thank you, Ratna. So let me introduce myself. I am Pauline Castellan. I'm the Southeast Asia Disaster Law Advisor of IFRC based here in Manila, Philippines. And I'll be sharing with you today what we call the IDRL guidelines and its benefit to humanitarian logistics. And I think maybe some of you have also seen this presentation a while back, but I will try to make some a different angle to suit it to our topic today about importation and customs clearances. So can you see the PowerPoint? Hello?
No, not yet.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so while this is being pulled up, let me just start by asking. The usual question that we ask is at every start of our presentation or workshop is, do you think disasters are governed by laws or rules? And I think throughout the years, the answer to that question has changed, starting from no to more people saying yes. And it's because while disasters may signify chaos, it does not mean that governments cannot prepare their laws and procedures to deal with international humanitarian assistance, at least that aspect of disasters. And that's what we refer to as legal preparedness. And as mentioned, the IFRC has a disaster law program, and we've done research which has shown that a lack of legal preparedness seriously hampers international relief.
Can you see the screen now?
I'm not sure. I cannot see it from my end, but
Juan, can you see it?
Not yet, Virginie.
Not yet.
Okay, because it says we are sharing the screen. So Ha is taking the hand again.
let me try maybe to share my own screen.
Thank you. Pauline?
It doesn't seem that, so the screen sharing is not working. So I'll just keep on speaking and while Center is fixing the PowerPoint. Is that okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
So we
Thank
save time.
Yeah.
All right, well, going back, as mentioned, we've seen significant barriers to the initiation of international assistance when governments lack legal preparedness. And some examples of these, I'm sure, are known to you. For example, problems around rapid issuance of visas for humanitarian personnel, challenges around customs and clearance for relief goods, approvals of specific licenses, for example, for radios and specialized telecoms. Thanks. I think I can see it now. Thank you. So we've also seen significant gaps in the oversight of donations. For example, those that are not exactly requested by the affected state. We've also seen some issues about poor coordination between government and humanitarian actors. So the bottom line is that without legal preparedness, aid would be slower and less efficient, and therefore we could not reach the communities that need assistance during or after a disaster. However, this does not mean that globally that we lack good practices on legal preparedness for international humanitarian assistance. On the contrary, because of the large scale and frequent disasters, these really have pushed governments and both governments and humanitarian actors to improve their domestic laws dealing with international assistance, which will be covered by what we call the IDRL guidelines. Next, please. So while there is really no international framework yet dealing with the overall scope of international humanitarian assistance, of course, we have the Revised Kyoto Convention and the Istanbul Protocol. These only touch a part of international assistance. However, in at the domestic level, the legal frameworks actually have some provisions that deal with this topic. So in order to consolidate these best practices and to address this gap at the international level, beginning in 2003, the IFRC worked closely with governments and our Red Cross, Red Crescent national societies, international orgs and parliamentarians to consolidate all of these good practices in a non-binding document, which is the Guidelines for the Domestic Facilitation and Regulation of International Disaster Relief and Initial Recovery Assistance, or IDRL Guidelines for short. So IDRL stands for International Disaster Response Laws, Rules, and Principles. And to clarify, this is not international law yet. They are mostly found in domestic laws, but they deal with international humanitarian assistance. As mentioned, the IDRL is a non-binding instrument that draws upon existing international norms on to provide recommendations for governments on how to prepare their domestic frameworks for international humanitarian assistance. It was adopted at the International Conference of the Red Cross and Red Crescent in 2007. And since that time, we have seen many governments utilize the IDRL guidelines and its principles either to develop or improve their domestic laws. So next slide, please. All right. And to summarize the principle or the content of the IDRL guidelines, it has 4 core principles which cover the conduct of government and non-government humanitarian actors alike. The first principle is that domestic actors have the primary role in coordinating international humanitarian assistance, and this is mostly referring to the government. This is rooted in the concept of state sovereignty and the responsibility of states to protect their constituents from disasters. The second principle is that international assisting actors have responsibilities as well that they must comply with when they plan to or are already providing aid on the ground. This means that international assisting actors must always abide by domestic laws, coordinate with domestic authorities, and follow basic humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, neutrality, and independence. The third principle, which is very relevant to our topic today, is that international assisting actors also need legal facilities. And by legal facilities, I'm referring to privileges and benefits granted by the government to international assisting actors to help them do their work in an effective and efficient manner, ensuring that they reach the most number of affected communities in the soonest time possible. And some examples of these legal facilities are, of course, those that refer to customs. Customs clearance priority, tax exemptions, waiver of or expedited visa processing for incoming international assisting actors. Lastly, with these legal facilities, the IDRL guidelines recommends that some of these facilities should be made conditional in the sense that they should only be granted to international assisting actors that are accredited or have a track record of following domestic laws and regulations and international humanitarian standards. So in sum, the IDRL guidelines, while they are non-binding, they are important for government and humanitarian actors in the following ways. For the government, it helps to clearly set out procedures, roles, and responsibilities at the domestic level when coordinating international humanitarian assistance. Second, it effectively controls the type and amount of incoming disaster relief, ensuring that these are what is needed by the community. And lastly, it reasonably regulates the conduct of international humanitarian actors on the ground. And it also has benefits for international assisting actors. So international assisting actors, by the way, would refer to both government and non-government actors, including also this civil military personnel. So for us, it facilitates the our response operations by giving us speedy and safe access to disaster affected areas. And it gives us what I discussed as the legal facilities to operate in the disaster affected country so that we can ensure that the aid that we're providing is rapid and effective, both in the disaster, in the response stage and in the early recovery stage. So moving on to the next slide. Sorry, can you please go back? As I mentioned, I wanted to focus on the concept or the portion of the IDRL guidelines that talk about customs or importation of goods and equipment. Something that I'd like to share, which I think is being implemented by many countries now, specifically also in ASEAN, in the ASEAN region where I work, is the recommendation that with regard to disaster relief and goods or equipment for initial or early recovery, which are exported or imported by or on behalf of assisting states and eligible assisting actors, the state should do 4 basic things. One is to exempt these goods and equipment from all customs and duties or governmental fees in their regulations before the disaster happens. The second is to exempt these from all export fees as well and import restrictions. The third is to simplify and minimize documentation requirements for export, transit, and import. And lastly, to permit re-exportation for any of the equipment or unused humanitarian goods which the assisting state or the non-government international assisting actor owns and wishes to retain, meaning it does not want to donate it or dispose of it in the disaster affected country. And also, as mentioned a while ago, we also have what we call the special goods or equipment that is used for humanitarian operations. There is also the recommendation that the inspection requirements for these goods should be waived or at least reduced. In simple terms, that these goods be made priority goods in terms of importation and customs procedures through pre-clearance processes. Also, another recommendation is that humanitarian actors or their representatives be allowed to process inspection and release processes outside of business hours or in other places other than the usual customs ports to minimize delay in cases where time is of the essence. And usually it is when it comes to emergencies. Of course, to be able to benefit from these privileges, the IDRL guidelines recommends that there be, at least maybe through an international or regional standard, for actors to follow and appropriately pack, classify, and mark the disaster relief and early recovery goods and equipment, and include detailed manifests with each shipment. So lastly, the IDRL guideline strongly pushes that the assisting international actor, whether it be government or non-government, assume responsibility for removing or disposing of any unwanted or unused relief goods and equipment. So as mentioned, this, next slide please, as mentioned, this is very much, these guidelines, the IDRL guidelines are being practiced generally in the ASEAN region. There are a lot of good IDRL practices here, and foremost of that is the adoption of the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response, or the ADMER, which is the first regional legally binding agreement to address regional emergency response. And the good thing about the ADMER is that it also requires ASEAN member states to legislate within their domestic legal framework provisions on facilitating the entry and even the exit of relief goods. So I suppose it would be also useful to show to you country level example of how the IDRL guidelines, when adopted at the national level, can really support humanitarian logistics and have huge benefits for affected communities. So in the next slide, you'll see here an example of how the Philippine government adopted certain laws and regulations during the COVID-19 pandemic that helped the Philippine Red Cross to provide tremendous support in the COVID-19 response. So as you know, the IFRC works with its national societies, and the Philippine Red Cross, as well as other NS, hold that special auxiliary role to the government in the humanitarian field. While the usual Red Cross law, so for example, in the Philippines, there is the Philippine Red Cross Act of 2009, already provides the Philippine Red Cross tax exemption and a legal basis for their implementation of national and international relief. The two COVID-19 laws that were passed early last year did two very important things. One is before the law, there were some regulations that were issued. The first one would be the regulation identifying who are frontliners. And when the Philippine Red Cross was identified as among frontliners, that meant that they had freedom of movement, even while there was a movement control regulation imposed. And that meant that they can then continue their humanitarian logistics operations, meaning they can continue their importation of goods and the distribution of these humanitarian goods in affected areas, whether it be for COVID-19 or some other emergency. In the two COVID-19 laws, the Philippine Red Cross was identified as a key humanitarian partner. So the wording was being the primary humanitarian agency that is auxiliary to the government in giving aid to the people, subject to reimbursement in the distribution of goods and services incidental to the fight against COVID-19. That meant that it was able to have faster logistics processes for the importation of mostly imported COVID-19 test kits and other medical equipment. And it also allowed the staff and volunteers freedom of movement to set up field hospitals and to provide the usual disaster relief assistance, even while there was a curfew and while there were movement restrictions within the country. So because of these legal facilities, you'll see in the next slide that this really enabled the Philippine Red Cross to really provide important support to the government. It was able to construct its first molecular lab for COVID-19 testing in just 14 days, even with these items needing to be imported from other countries. And this molecular lab also received accreditation from the Department of Health, so RITM, within a month after COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. It was also one of the reasons why the Philippine Red Cross was the first and still is the only facility that can provide saliva-based RT-PCR tests for COVID-19. So currently, the Philippine Red Cross accounts for 24% of the country's nationwide COVID-19 testing. And to summarize my presentation, and going back to the first question, whether laws and rules govern disasters, we can clearly see that they do. And we can clearly see how beneficial it is for humanitarian logistics for governments to adopt the IDRL guidelines and principles in their domestic laws. We've seen how the ASEAN region gives a good example of regional IDRL through the ADMIR. And we have seen that in the Philippines, the legal facilities granted to the Philippine Red Cross have allowed it to provide tremendous assistance to people during COVID-19. And with that, I'd like to close my presentation and opening the floor later on for Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pauline, for this comprehensive presentation and detailed information. I will share the presentation with the registered participants. The IDRL guidelines are very important recommendations for member states, and an aspect that is included in these IDRL guidelines is the importation of telecommunication equipment. This is always an issue. It has to come very quick to the country to make sure that when everything is destroyed, everyone can still communicate. And then today we have our international telecommunication equipment, and Mrs. Maritza DELGADO will present the work that they are doing on the importation of telecommunication equipment and the Tampere Convention. Maritza, over to you.
Thank you very much, Virginie, for the introduction. And today, as she said, I'm going to talk about the importance of having in place strategies to import telecommunications equipment in the aftermath of disasters. So, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So we all know that information and communication technologies are one of the major pillars for disaster management and risk reduction. We use these technologies to monitor the underlying hazards and to deliver the vital information to all the stakeholders, and of course, the most vulnerable communities at risk. And one of the most important activities of using technologies is to ensure the vital flow of information in a timely manner before and after disasters strike. And why? Because this is critical for decision-making processes, for coordination of rapid response, and to save lives at the end. But when big disasters strike, we don't have these technologies in place. No, we don't have mobile networks and services which we can use. But of course, there is an urgent need to reestablish these telecommunication links for disaster response and coordination with different stakeholders involved in disaster management at a national level, and of course, including communities that have been affected, and at an international level among different UN agencies. And we heard about this importance in the previous presentation, because we need to ensure that the organizations, the UN organizations, NGOs that will support the disaster, the country have in place also and can use the technologies when they are trying to import this equipment. And this is why the importation of telecommunications equipment is so important. But crossing borders, we know that can be a big challenge. And when we talk about telecommunications equipment, we have an international treaty, which is called the Tampere Convention, and the Tampere Convention on the provision of telecommunication resources for mitigation and relief operations. Most of you are aware of this convention. The Tampere Convention was concluded in 1998 in Finland, and it came into force on January 2005. But what is this convention? This convention is based in two basic principles. One is reducing the regulatory barriers to the transit of personnel and equipment, and also to guarantee the necessary privileges, immunities, and facilities to the relief personnel and organizations providing telecommunications assistance. And these privileges, facilities, and immunities are, for example, exemptions from tax obligations, licensing requirements, and of course, the protection of staff, which will be in charge of managing the equipment. This Tampere Convention, this international treaty, provides us with some benefits. The first one, of course, is the facilitation of deployment of telecommunication resources in the aftermath of disasters. But also, it puts in place a structure for managing the request for assistance, and also creates mechanisms and models agreements to be signed between the organization providing support to end the country itself. But one of the most important aspects of this convention is that it protects the interests of the beneficiary states or the beneficiary country. But how? This means that the host government retains the right to supervise this assistance at any time. Knowing this and the benefits that it has, we only have until today 49 countries that have ratified this convention. But why? Because there are some challenges. One of the biggest challenges that we have in the moment, or that there is in the moment, is the lack of awareness and knowledge about the benefits of this convention. It also, there's lack of coordination mechanisms at a national level. And of course, there are long ratification procedures. And to have the Tampere Convention implemented at a national level, we need to have some legislation. And this is one of the things that countries do not have. And also, they don't know how to do it most of the time. And of course, there is an absence of the activation process. This is why we only have 49, as I mentioned already, and we need to work towards having more. But having in place this Tampere Convention, we cannot do this alone. We need to have an implementation process. We need to have national strategies that we can use to enable these importation procedures and to have them in place. We cannot wait to have the disaster and then start with requesting assistance. We need to activate all the processes when the disaster strikes, and we need to act before. This is the reason why in ITU, we are supporting our countries in highlighting the need to have national strategies in place. And these strategies are national emergency telecommunication plans. As mentioned before, these strategies need to be adopted, need to be in place, need to be rehearsed, because we cannot wait until the last minute to have that. These telecommunication plans include the private sector, the government of ICTs, the regulatory authorities, the ministries. But most important is that it has a multi-stakeholder involvement and participation. And this not only includes the ICT world, it includes everyone working at a national level, involved in disaster management and very active in the response. We need to have these processes in place. We need to have a governance framework of roles and responsibilities of each one of the stakeholders. And this includes customs administrations and UN entities as well, working in the country and in the region, because they have a big role to play when disasters strike. But as mentioned, they have to be involved in these plans and processes in advance. So what is a national emergency telecommunication plan? So it's a strategy that enables and ensures communications availability during all phases of the disaster management. And it promotes coordination across all levels of government, between public and private organizations, and between communities at risk. So these plans are necessary to be in place so we can not only have the ratification of the Tampere Convention, but also the implementation at a national level. What we have seen is that in the past, and still we see it, is that countries have ratified the Tampere Convention. They have never implemented it. Why? Because they don't know how to do it. And this is something that we are working from ITU. We have designed an online training course, which refers to the Tampere Convention. And it provides a real opportunity for all members of the country involved in disaster management, or those who are not, to have more knowledge or acquire more knowledge about the Tampere Convention, which are the benefits, which are the challenges, how to implement, how to ratify it. And it provides a lot of examples on what countries have done to ratify this convention at a national level. And also, because this does not come alone, we have developed some guidelines to support countries to develop and put in place these national emergency telecommunication plans. And we have the guidelines, we have a written report, but also an online training course that gives you a step-by-step process on how you can, at a national level, get involved with different stakeholders and to develop their own plan based on your specific needs and requirements. These plans are not standalone plans. These needs to be included in the national emergency plans at a national level, and linked to the other national strategies, as we heard before, in the IDRL guidelines, because telecommunications are vital. Without telecommunications, coordination and response mechanisms and preparedness mechanisms are just not cannot be done. But to try to be ready to use and to see if these all these plans that we have in place, strategies, are fit for purpose, we have also developed online training course on developing very simple exercises, the simulation exercises, which are the tabletop ones. So the tabletop simulation exercises are a very good tool to implement, to develop at a national level. It's very simple because it's around the table. You don't need a lot of resources, financial resources to develop these. And it provides a good opportunity for you to meet other persons, focal points in other organizations, and to establish relationships and be ready, be prepared to provide a coordinated response when disasters strike. And this is what we are promoting from the ITU's perspective. We need to have in place these plans, implement these plans through a multi-stakeholder approach. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maritza. Indeed, I think that preparedness and having this plan in advance is key. And it's important for government to take into account the recommendations that ITU and your partners did on that. You have mentioned training and the importance of training, that you have developed a training on this topic, which is a very good course. We are also in the IMPACCT Working Group looking at how to enhance the skills and competencies of humanitarian actors. And we have just developed with the members of the IMPACCT Working Group, the World Customs Organization, UNCTAD, NGOs, health logistics, and the partners, an e-learning course for humanitarian practitioners on the importation and customs clearance. And Juan will present this course that we have, that is in the pilot phase, and that we will launch for the public in September. Juan, over to you.
Thank you, Virginie. Indeed, yeah, I'm really honored to be able to present this concrete output from the IMPACCT Working Group, where the IFRC has been one of the contributors. I think that you can see the screen. This is related to the, well, this product is linked to the objective number 4 of the IMPACCT Working Group, which is about increasing formal opportunities for humanitarian partners. We feel that, yeah, as important as working and supporting governments to streamline their processes, is really, really important as well. The humanitarian organizations, practitioners, they really understand the process and in each country, the different national regulations in order to import goods properly. If they don't do, we have seen in many cases, in many countries, how they might end up blocking customs by even completing the wrong form or giving additional extra work to customs officers. Sorry, I have a small problem passing the screen. Here we have the next one. I will quickly go through the objective of the course, as Virginie has been mentioning, is to increase the knowledge and skills, basic knowledge and skills on the process. But what we found that it was important, we were looking around existing courses in order to try to avoid reinventing the wheel, but we didn't found anything that it was really contextualized for the humanitarian operations and the work that humanitarian organizations they undertake. That's why we have been taking, considering the standard one for the commercial and then adjusting it to the reality of humanitarian organizations. The target audience is humanitarian practitioners, so it could be UN agencies, the Red Cross and Red Crescent Network, NGOs, international NGOs, governmental agencies, private sector, students in general. So being a basic course and being offered free of charge, we feel that it will be of interest for many actors involved in humanitarian response. The course is structured in 5 different modules. From the initial understanding of the customs and importation. Second module is about border management and coordinated border management, how this can influence in having a more fluid importation of goods, especially for relief items. The third module is about the real cost of importation and humanitarian relief items. Fourth module is about documentation and information quality, very, very important. To provide information in the standard way that the customs officers they are expecting it. And the fifth one is modernization and custom systems, which I think it will be linked very well with the next presenter, our colleague from UNCTAD. Quickly, the rollout, as Virginie was mentioning, we are in May and we are starting the pilot phase. We build already the course. Through the feedback from during May and June, the idea is to do the final adjustments during summertime in North Hemisphere, July and August, and the course will be launched officially on September this year, 2021. It will be an e-course, self-study with webinars. We are thinking of organizing 2 webinars per year in order to complement this theory with some specific sessions addressing either some of the questions that the participants they come across the training, or some specific themes or topics that they are either suggested or what that we think that through the emergency response of the year they might have become a critical element for the humanitarian response. And quickly mentioning that it will be hosted in the learning platform from the logistic cluster, as I already mentioned, free of access, available to the public in general. You just need to self-register in the learning platform, where there are some other courses about logistics. You will be able to download and follow without connection. And quickly showing a screenshot of how it might look like. You can see now in the screen. For additional information, feel free to contact the IMPACCT Working Group, and looking forward to receive feedback and how the first cohort of participants they are finding of interest this theme covered by this course. From that, I will give the floor back to you, Virginie.
Thank you very much, Juan. We are really looking forward to receiving the comments of the participant to this pilot phase, so that we can make the adjustment and then launch it. This is really a request that we have received for years from participants and from remittance partners to enhance their skills. So it is very, very important. Thank you very much, Juan. The next speaker is about something that also is key to a humanitarian response. We all know that in the initial phase of an emergency, there might not be electricity, no telecommunication equipment, and we have just had a presentation from ITU how to make sure that we can communicate again. When the electricity and the IT equipment are in place, it means that customs administration can use again their IT system to proceed with the customs clearance. And UNCTAD has developed over the last 30 years an IT system called CIUTA, Automated System for Customs Data. And we are working together to create a specific module like a IT humanitarian corridor in the IT technology that Mr. CIUTA from UNCTAD will present. Kosti, over to you.
Thank you, Virginie, and good afternoon to everyone. I will try to share my screen, and if I will succeed, just 1 second.
Yes, okay, we can see it.
Okay.
If you put full screen, then.
Can you see my screen, Virginie?
Yes, we can, but it's not the full screen. It's the PowerPoint with your email on the right.
Eventually, can you share your screen if it's easier like that?
Okay.
I will stop sharing from my side.
Okay. So share screen. Can you see it?
No, not yet, Virginie.
Is it okay enough? No?
No, not yet.
And it's on the right screen, says it's okay.
No, now it's we see the website from HELiX. Perfect.
Kosti, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Next screen, if you can move to the next screen, please, Virginie. In this presentation, we'll see how we can transpose the provisions of the international conventions, as mentioned before by colleagues from WCO, IFRC, and ITU into operational environment, while focusing mainly on customs provisions, of course, and on something that has been mentioned in the first presentation, some of the standards from the Revised Kyoto Convention Special Annex J5, in particular in relation with lodging of simplified declaration or provisional or incomplete declaration, and also lodging that declaration prior to the arrival of the goods with the scope to be released upon arrival. And the examination and sampling of goods only in exceptional circumstances. Next slide, please. Just to see how the main processes have to be automated in the context of digitalization of entry and importation of relief consignments. You can see on the screen a mapping between the three main phases of an emergency and the functions that IT systems should facilitate and the respective actors. So we are speaking about the capabilities of establishing a list of emergency relief items, including their respective HS codes in the pre-emergency or preparatory phase, in setting the procedures and the simplifications, in allowing eligible organizations to self-register before the emergency is declared, and to provide certain types of simplifications or facilitations, which may include, yes, the submission of a simplified declaration, the relief from import duty, and the temporary admission. Next slide, please. So just few remarks regarding the processes that have been automated in ASIREC, in the dedicated module for relief emergency consignments. So we have depicted exactly the operations which can be moved from the moment that instead of performing those operations during the emergency, to be moved in the preparatory stage. And here we are speaking about the task that the National Disaster Management Authority and Customs are involved into in defining the exhaustive list of emergency relief items. This is highly recommended for disaster-prone countries. They have the experience about the list of relief items that have been requested during previous emergencies, and they can work together with customs in defining those lists and the respective HS codes. In terms of customs, should define the customs procedures and applicable simplifications. This can be done also in the preparatory phase. And the operations, and this is the main change, I would say, in the business process, is allowing operators to register in advance as organizations potentially involved in relief operations, and customs to authorize those organizations in advance. Next slide, please. In terms of authorization, here we speak about organizations which can benefit from different types of simplifications, and the scope would be to combine in one integrated authorization all the simplifications that customs can provide. In terms of using a simplified custom declaration with a reduced data set, providing organizations with relief from import duties for goods imported for humanitarian purposes, and also to fast track with automatic release, immediate release, upon arrival of consignments. Next slide. During the emergency, the automation processes here have been seen from two perspectives. As mentioned by Virginie in the introduction, we have envisaged also the situation when the National Customs Information System is not available during natural disasters, and we provide as HELiX solution also software as a service to ensure the business continuity in case of unavailability of National Customs system. During the emergency, the National Disaster Management Authority, it's able to record the emergency initiation and the estimated duration of emergency. They can decide about the relief items, which are considered as priority needs by the government, including the requested volume, and send automatically a notification to all pre-registered humanitarian organizations with information, essential information about the emergency, the duration, estimated duration of emergency, the relief items, and the requested volume. Next slide, please. During the emergency, the coordination actors and also the humanitarian organizations involved in emergencies, they can track consignments in real time. The National Disaster Management Authority can monitor the volume of relief items imported, and the organizations can generate full declarations within the prescribed time limits, mainly after the emergency it's closed. In terms of compliance, as HELiX, it enables customs authorities and other government agencies to record the overall compliance of the humanitarian organization based on feedback from controls, participation in previous emergency situations, and also feedback from all the other government authorities. During the emergency, also customs and other organizations, we received notifications about non-compliance, and it allows customs authorities to suspend or to revoke the simplifications gave to the humanitarian organizations in case of serious or repeated violation. Next slide, please. National disaster management authorities and customs authorities can perform post-audit and assessment of the compliance of the humanitarian organizations once the National Disaster Management Authority is recording the end of emergency procedure. In addition to this, the customs authority can also enable other types of simplification for the recovery phase. So it can record the end of a certain level of simplification, opening the floor for other types of simplifications. Next slide, please. Very important process is the automatic notifications. I mentioned few of those notifications which are done during different phases of emergency. Notifications are being sent to all pre-registered organizations associated with the respective emergency. The content of the message includes the emergency reference, the validity, the estimated duration, the list of requested relief items and their volume, and the estimated clearance time, as the system contains also timers for the automatic release of goods if the consignments are not subject of physical examination. Notifications are also sent when the National Disaster Management Authority decides to extend the duration of the emergency. These kind of updates are sent in real time to all the relevant pre-registered actors, including the new validity dates or updates in terms of relief items being requested, or updates in terms of volumes of the relief items being requested. Upon termination of emergency, a notification is again sent to all the pre-registered organization, with notifying them that for the consignments which have not departed yet from the country of export, they will not benefit from the same simplifications as they were before during the emergency. However, the respective consignments which have already started, initiated their trip to the affected country, that will continue to be allowed by the customs information system. Next slide. Thank you. I want just to highlight a fact that the respective simplifications are tailored for emergencies, as it was mentioned in the previous slides. However, the module, the component can be adapted to work in an environment which covers also other types of disasters and emergencies, including complex emergencies, including pandemics. We've seen also the fact that different organizations which have been involved in our IMPACCT group have, I would say, updated the conventions and the recommendations. Those recommendations are currently included in the new version of HELiX, and the module will be ready to be deployed for the interested country also as a software as a service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kosti. I know that there are a lot of ongoing activities in the region with your colleague based there. So it's a very important aspect, and thank you very much to UNCTAD for the development of this tool that will definitely speed up the importation of aid. Thank you very much. Another point, and the last point of our presentation today, is information sharing. And I have one slide that will explain how do we support humanitarian actors, and how do we work with the government when an emergency happens. As soon as an emergency happens, and an earthquake, for example, hit a country, or a cyclone is approaching a country, the virtual OSOC opens a discussion and publish information about the situation. In this tool that you can find online, there is a section, a chapter for customs, information on customs and importation procedures. And as soon as the emergency strikes, I contact either WCO, either UNCTAD, to identify a focal point. And when the focal point is identified, we ask them whether they would agree to contribute to a WhatsApp group where both the government and the humanitarian actors will participate, and then they can answer all the questions directly online to all the participants. So it's a session of question and answers is available 24 hours during the period of the emergency. We started this process in Mozambique a few years ago, and then we did it in the Bahamas, we did it in Lebanon, and it proved very useful to the humanitarian community and to the customs administration and cross-border to understand what is in the pipeline and what is arriving at the customs entry point, what procedures should be made, in advance, on arrival, etc., etc. So it's a very a good tool that we can use to enhance the information sharing between the different actors. Of course, we also publish the information on our website, and then you can find, for example, the information we have published during the response to COVID. And we organize as well on a regular basis a virtual conference in collaboration with the Global Logistics Cluster as well, to update them and to continue sharing information with the partners on the customs, the importation and custom procedures, as well as the different challenges, so that we can all together find solutions. So this is the end of our presentation today. You have here our email address, and I thank you very much for listening to us. And if you have questions or any comments, please either contact us or write on the chat. I can see that there is an evaluation survey as well that the AHA Center put on the chat. So please take the time to fill in the form so that they have some feedback from you. I would like to thank as well the speakers and give the floor back to AHA Center if they have anything to add for the session.
Thank you very much, Ms. Virginie, for your for moderating the session. Thank you very much for all speakers. Before we leave, could you please all to turn on the video? We will have a photo session together. We are still waiting for others to turning on the video, please. Okay. I will count 3, 2, 1, go. Again, big smile, please. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining the session. Have a nice day. See you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
and talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye.